Welcome back to the Profitable Mini Farm. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. It's been a while since those first 10 episodes that I did with Jody, but now we're back with the next set of 10. Call this Season 2. If you haven't listened to the show and you're new here, this is how it works. Each week, I talk to farmer Jody Roebuck from Roebuck Farm in New Zealand, and we take a closer look at what makes Jody's farm special, what makes it successful. We started the show because a lot of people struggle with making a living market farming, and Jody's someone who's been very successful making a living doing this. So we wanted to share some of what he's learned and what he does to help you out there listening to this make your farm better and hopefully make more money or continue making a living doing this. It's no joke, farming isn't easy. A lot of farms go out of business. Hopefully, the information in this show will help you stay in business and thrive as a business. There's a lot of farms out there doing it. Jody's one of them. So sharing these tips is our way of helping you out. Today's episode focuses on important considerations to think about getting a greenhouse. That's a big step for any farm because it's a big financial investment. Jody's going to talk about his process on why they took the big step and what it means for their farm business to invest in a permanent greenhouse. I think you're going to enjoy this one. But before we get into today's episode, this one is brought to you by Paper Pot Co. Farm Tools. That's my company. Did you know that Paper Pot Co. now carries premium insect netting? If you need to protect your crop from insects, wind, or rain, check out our brand new Insectanet. Insectanet is a premium woven insect netting with a mesh size small enough to keep out insects in the thrip size range. That's tiny. The best part about this netting is that while the mesh size is small, the net is still very soft, breathable, and lets a lot of light through, over 90% to be exact. It's UV treated and much more durable than frost cloth, so it should last for several seasons. Plus, it's conveniently sized for 100-foot beds. It's comparable to the leading insect nettings out there, but at a better price. If you're looking for a crop protection solution for insects, wind, rain, or hail, check out Paper Pot Co.'s brand new Insectanet at paperpot.co. Before we get into this one, people always ask, hey, how can I support the show? I really love these episodes that you do with farmers like Ray Tyler and Jody. Well, one way you can support the show is by making a purchase at Paper Pot Co. Now, don't buy stuff that you don't need, but if you do need something and we can provide that solution for you, it's a win-win. In fact, it's actually a triple win. You win, it supports this show, and it also supports the small businesses and families that we employ and source from. If you have to make a purchase and we can offer that product at a reasonable price, consider making that purchase at paperpot.co. Thanks so much. Now let's get into it. It's Season 2 of the Profitable Mini Farm with Jody Roebuck. Today we're talking greenhouses, and one of the first things that anybody should think about when they get a greenhouse or any type of infrastructure or tool for the farm is why even get it in the first place? Why should somebody consider getting one if they're a market farmer?
I guess it comes back to your climate and are you growing year round? We are growing year round, and our climate, you've probably heard already, we're in the roaring 40s. We're at latitude 39, 2.3 to 2.5 meters of rain. The rain's, we have to work around it, but for us, it really is the insane winds that come that can be sustained at 140 kilometers. I think that's 60 plus miles per hour. And so it's about consistency for our production, supply, and also for our crew having places to work when it's just, we say, raining cats and dogs or super windy outside. The classic season, I guess, bring it back to season extension and consistency. I think it's a master. I don't see a lot of growers without greenhouses unless they've got, and I may be wrong here, but like a Mediterranean climate where it's always sunny, it's not usually that windy, and they can grow year round out, or they can grow during the growing season outdoors. So we were late starters with our larger greenhouses, just sheer. It was just the capital we had to invest. I wish we had the finances to have put the greenhouses up earlier. So really, it's winter to keep the production going through the tougher part of the year.
Greenhouses are probably one of the most expensive pieces of infrastructure somebody's going to get on a farm. Maybe a wash pack building might be more expensive if it's something pretty elaborate, but it's going to be one of the most expensive things people get on a market farm. And you mentioned cost can be a challenge. Now, here in the States, there's a lot of high tunnel grants that people have gotten to try and put tunnels up. When you look at the economics of a greenhouse, how do you view cost in versus cost out for a greenhouse?
The classic term in business is ROI, return on investment. So we're looking at just doing the math on our production and when are we just going to even break even? Like, when is the greenhouse ours? Less the investment. And so we're really just trying to dial down on fast crops in there year round with one long season crop in summer. And so I guess we're just looking at a calculation, two ways to look at it, a calculation on, we average 6 crops, 5 fast, 1 long in the greenhouse, pulling $400 off there each time, off each 50-foot bed. And then we're just working out how long does it take to pay that back. And I guess when is the right time, looking at your market streams, when is the right time that we've got the market streams to support us with that production to put it up and get growing in it. So our new greenhouse has just arrived, being delivered. This is going to be our biggest one, and we're pretty excited about it. It's 400 square meters.
If you think about the economics, the ROI on a greenhouse, there's a couple things I think somebody can think of. So let's assume they're not in some great Mediterranean climate like San Diego, where you can pretty much grow all year out in the open. You'd have to look at, I think, farm financial planning this way. If you don't have season extension, there's a certain amount of months you can grow in. And that is going to translate into some amount of revenue. If you can add some season extension, you're going to add on more months to what you could grow just au natural. And that's going to bring some corresponding revenue with it. So it comes down to, it's like that delta in revenue. Is it worth that additional revenue that I can gain through season extension to invest in season extension? And if you can meet your farm financial goals in your normal growing season without season extension, then you don't need it. But if you want to try and take it up a level, then you look at, all right, if I add making this up a month on the front end, a month on the back end, that's going to bring in this much revenue to the farm annually. I'm going to have this greenhouse for 10 years. Is it worth me investing this much money in it up front, given that return? Or could I take that money and do something else with it, or just save it for a future potential need? In your case, if you didn't have a greenhouse on the farm, how much do you think that would affect your farm revenue with a greenhouse versus like the Red Path hoops that you use now? What is that greenhouse bringing addition to the farm if you had to try and put a figure to it?
Yeah, good call. The Red Path hoops, a tiny caterpillar tunnel. They are a game changer for us in the field. We use in winter, half the field's covered with them. Again, it's pretty challenging to keep plastic on them, and imagine you've got half your farm covered in hoops and plastic, and the sun comes out, which is not very often here in winter, and then you've got to open and close all of those. Basically, every cloche is another greenhouse, so that becomes super labor intensive, a little risky on occasions when it's really windy. You can lose those as well. We came to a point with our current biggest greenhouse is 90 squares, and we just really struggled to keep our consistency during winter outdoors, and we knew that it was a necessity, but we just didn't have the finance to put at it at the time. There were other things like wash and pack and walk-in chiller had to be in for us before we could invest in a greenhouse. So our 90 square greenhouse is 5 years old, and it's definitely taken the stress off us for winter. We can't have our retail fridges empty, and we can't be like, oh, it's another 4 weeks until something's ready. We've got to have them stocked continually. So that was a big change for us in our production to keep the consistency during the winter months. We're really building for the winter months, our greenhouses, to lift our production. And I think when the weather's really tough, it's enabled us to keep working indoors. And we also see when it's really bad, the quality from the indoors it's great. It's a bit faster to grow, but we can rely on it, knowing doesn't matter how bad the weather gets, we can bank on it more, and that's really assuring.
That's another consideration that goes beyond financial. It's quality of life, I guess you could say. You know, it's like a dishwasher. Sure, you can hand wash dishes every night, but you can also just put them in a dishwasher. And it sounds like on the farm, you could have grown greens over the winter, but it was a challenge. It wasn't the best conditions. Quality was a challenge. So by bringing it indoors, you take something that was a real struggle, you've eliminated the struggle part of it, and you've made the quality much more consistent.
Yeah, and I think there's a nice correlation between investments, your systems, your infrastructure is definitely coming back to the quality of life. With COVID, we've probably had some of our worst weather ever, and I think a lot of people probably relate to that. But we've really lifted our consistency through growing indoors, and that definitely takes the stress off. When you know you can supply, that's the job done. You still got to do the work, but knowing that, I guess my biggest stress looking back over the years past is my biggest responsibility is feeding people. And if I can't do that, that's when my stress lifts up. There's always times of the year when you lose crops for different reasons. It's usually beyond your control. But going to bed at night, knowing I can supply my people, that's really what it's all about. For us, that's more important than what's our total turnover and our profit margin at the end of the year. If we're feeding people, the business is good financially. So yeah, that's really where the greenhouses have come in for us.
One thing I've heard people say in the past is you buy the biggest greenhouse that you can afford. And obviously it's got to fit inside your space. When you think about your greenhouse purchase, what was the thought process behind the sizing of it?
As the business grows physically as well, our production's lifting. It's doubled since COVID. We're looking back at our 90 square meter greenhouse. When we built that, I thought it was, at the time, it was our largest. And I thought, geez, this is big. Once we started growing in it, I was like, no, it's actually not. And the new greenhouse we're putting up is 4.5 times bigger. So we've gone Our current biggest is 90 square meters. We're going to 406 squares. It would have been great to have this a few years ago, but it probably at the point was oversized for our market stream. Whereas now it's key that we're at the longest day, where it's key for us to build this greenhouse, get our production up and going before late fall, to be able to take on more clients and keep them with us through winter. And so looking at the costings of it, we'll come back to the design, but by going bigger, it's half price per unit of area, and that's pretty significant. So it's double the cost of the first greenhouse, but it's 4.5 times bigger, and that's, given our climate, it's just going to be a game changer for us. And I think that coming back to quality of life, my responsibility is feeding people, but my other responsibility on the farm is my team and looking after them. And I know Jean Martin has this classic saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. And we don't have that amount of snow, but there's only so much rain and wind you can work in before you're just saturated. You can change out to a whole new outfit, another set of gumboots and raincoat, but there's only so much rain that you can deal with before you're just freezing, and you get yourself cold, then you get yourself sick. And so we just went through our wettest November on record. That's really the last month of spring, to give a bit of perspective. And it was so bad, 28 out of 30 days, it was wet, overcast, cooler than usual. And first time since I've been growing, our days to maturity, our DTM went backwards on the last month of spring. It was that, I've never seen that before. The crops were taking longer to grow, whereas usually they're just speeding up, getting faster and faster. Because we track the DTM, we just adjusted for that. But that's how much of a challenge November was. And I guess we kept our supply going, we adapted, but the pressure was on for me to keep my team working, to keep jobs ahead of them, and there's only so much weather we can work in outdoors. We can't direct seed in driving rain, can't use the greens harvester in driving rain, so we've just got to be Johnny on the spot and work around the weather. Because we're 5 kilometers from the ocean, 3 miles from the ocean, even the weather's really hard to predict. I'm looking at the forecast constantly, and it's just hard to predict it when it comes off the ocean. It can be completely opposite of what they say. They might say it's going to heavy rain in the morning, and it might actually come later in the day. So we just got to keep our eye on things. And my team are really good, but I might say team brief in the morning, this is our tasks, and then by morning tea I'm like, hang on, things have changed. Maybe I've got them on indoor work and the sun comes out, and I'm like, we're outdoors, lift those tarps, this is our only window to be planting, or rains come in early, retreat to the greenhouses. It's keeping the workflow going is just, we can't plan for the week, really. We've just got to be super adaptable. And the team my growers at the moment come from a very different climate, a Mediterranean climate. Tiago is market gardener in Portugal, and Sergio is from Spain. David's from Italy. So they're just used to lots of sun, not a lot of wind. They rock up to Taranaki and they're like, what is this place?
How big is the greenhouse? What's the footprint?
Our current greenhouse is 90 squares, and the new one is 406 squares. And then we've got 3 other smaller greenhouses.
So 406. What is that though? Length and width?
Double arch, so it's 22 meters wide and 18 meters long. So it's a double bay greenhouse that is really square.
So 18 meters long, that's about 60 feet. So it's about 60 by 60 is a big square.
Yep.
How many beds can you fit in there?
16 beds that are approximately 50 foot.
And they're all 30-inch wide beds.
Yep, 30-inch, small paths, 1 foot on the paths. And we're putting a setback in there just for workflow. So as you come in, there's basically a main path that runs sideways, so you can bring in tools, bring in people, use the paper pot transplanter. Whereas a 90 square meter greenhouse, we've just about got no setback, no path. For that investment, we just maximize the growing space in there. So there's just about no room for foot traffic.
So one thing that I don't think has ever came up on shows before is consideration around selecting a greenhouse. There's obviously a lot of different styles there. You're dealing with some extreme conditions with the wind. In your context, what were the criteria you needed to have in a greenhouse, and what would you advise people to think about when selecting one as they adjust for things like wind and other climate factors?
Well, I think regardless of your climate, the kind of the overriding principle, and I hear Ben Hartman say this, is he says it, ventilation. Our design for high wind, we have roll-up sides on both the sides, and we have big sliding doors at each end. And then the new greenhouse, the double arch, has a ceiling vent on that as well. And then we run fans 24/7 in the greenhouse. And a little tip I picked up from the greenhouse companies, because I like straight lines, is the ceiling fans, you want to set them up on an angle to get the circulation going around the greenhouse, rather than setting them straight where they blow air down one end and it comes back and fights against itself. The ventilation is key. And then when obviously now we've got big openings with we're in a high wind design. So our greenhouses are made by Redpath Greenhouses. They're a New Zealand company, Australian company as well, and they do the cloches. Our greenhouses are engineered for each site. They've actually overspec'd the steel uprights for this one, knowing that we're in a high wind design. And so I guess the design is like the frame, the steel and the tubing is 90 by 50, so it's almost like a 3x2. It's pretty insane. And the side walls, we put out the side posts first, concreted in the ground, and then the design for the next step is there's a big guttering that runs along the top of your side walls, and that's part of the structure. So your side posts go in first, the guttering goes on before you put your arches up, and then you finish the whole greenhouse with skinning it. The gutters work really good regardless of your climate. They're part of the strength, but you can divert the water off the greenhouse, and then you can also catch it and store it. So we're catching water off our 90 square meter greenhouse into a water tank that then goes to the UV filter for wash and pack. And just imagine our climate with 2.5 meters of rain. If we didn't have a gutter on the greenhouse, that 2.5 meters of rain spilling off the greenhouse onto your field production, plus the outdoor rain, you basically doubled you've got 5 meters of rain on those adjacent beds. So being able to get the water away from the greenhouse and then also catch it is really nice part of the design.
Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Paper Pot Co. In addition to hosting a podcast, I've also run Paper Pot Co. for the last 6 years. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that. I don't just host podcasts, but I've also run this small tool company. It's a small tool company that focuses on tools that increase farm efficiency. One of the tools that we have to offer are Quick Hoops. They're an ultra portable yet extremely strong low tunnel solution. Compared to other low tunnel solutions out there, this one should be easier to use and much, much stronger. If you listen to this series with Jody, then you know that one tool that's really helped his farm in his windy, rainy, wet climate in New Zealand are Red Path hoops, also known as Quick Hoops here in the US. Jody's used them on his farm in conjunction with insect netting for the past 6 years to protect his crops from rain, wind, and insects. And while this episode that you're listening to today focuses on greenhouses, which are amazing, they aren't the right solution for every farm today. Some farms just aren't ready to go to a greenhouse yet. Well, Quick Hoops offer a low-cost protection solution to protect your crops while you scale up to getting that amazing greenhouse. The best part is you can use Quick Hoops inside that greenhouse if you ever want to double up on protection. So there's something that I think you can buy and use for the entirety of your farming career. It's not one of those things you buy it and then you just throw it away. They're made from high quality steel and should last a decade or more in most conditions. Earlier this year, we started importing the hoops into the US, and we're now the exclusive retailer in the US and Canada of Quick Hoops made by Red Path. If you've been searching for the perfect low tunnel solution, one that's fast to set up, doesn't use any sandbags or ropes to hold that fabric down, and one that can actually withstand some strong winds, it doesn't just work inside a tunnel. This works in the open field in the highest of winds. Then check out Quick Hoops, available at paperpot.co.
You guys get so much rain. Is that a design consideration? People design for snow load. Snow is obviously static. It can pile up and just weight down a greenhouse. But with that much rain, is the rain itself an issue?
Yeah. I guess that's why they put gutters on it. And it's, how do I say, every winter month we're averaging a foot of rain each month, and sometimes that can come in a matter of days, but that's an average 300 mils each month and or more. Our whole site was set it up to let the excess out, whether it's a greenhouse or the field. With the volumes of rain we have, if we can't let the excess out, we're basically going to be underwater. And before we made adjustments to our site, we used to have a lake in front of our house before we adjusted the contour to let that excess out. It was tough just seeing standing water around. Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest changes we made, to just let the excess return to the waterway.
Cat tunnels are something that's very popular here in the States. Why wouldn't that work in your situation?
I think they'll be fine with the rain, Diego, but the wind, it's just a matter of time. There's no real, with the saying is 4 seasons in one day. We could get a sustained, what's the strong wind they call? A gale force wind any day of the year. It's not just like this is something that happens in winter or spring. It can happen any time. 100 or 60 to 70 miles. I know those growers out there with cat tunnels that have experienced that. It's a fair challenge. I think if we were going, they would just end up in the neighbour's forest. If we had cat tunnels, I would be modifying them to make them permanent. And then again, it comes down to the engineering, and just instead of just pulling the plastic sides up, we'd be skinning them with roll-up sides. Even with our, kind of coming back to a big greenhouse, even engineered for 140 kilometre wind, when the big sustained south wind comes, I actually get, I don't know what you call it, but the strops from my vehicle, like if I'm tying building materials to the top of my truck, I've got these strops on there. I take the strops and I strop down the roll-up sides and I strop the front door. That's how intense it is the door is probably the weakest point of the greenhouse. And if I don't strop it, it's still going to blow in. And then we're basically losing all the crops indoors. So yeah, cat tunnels, I think you need a super sheltered site. For us, shelter, that amount of shelter to block the wind, you're going to end up so restricted for sun access that that's the big trade-off. Everyone says, oh, can't you plant more shelter? And we have. You can't be sheltered from every wind direction. Like our site is protected from a trade wind completely. So it can be a 70 mile westerly and we're good. But as soon as it turns around from the south, it's a whole different thing. So yeah, big trade-offs is how much shelter can you have, but also are you blocking your sunrise, sunset, or your day length? And sun's really important to us because we don't get much of it. So yeah, we don't have any cat tunnels. They are being used a lot in New Zealand, but especially in Australia. Very cheap compared to the greenhouses we're putting up. But yeah, we can't. For us, it's an investment that we know has a shelf life, or it's super risky.
When you think about the sizing of a greenhouse, do you think you just go big? You get the biggest you can?
If I could have prioritized our new greenhouse build years ago, it would have been a game changer. Again, without repeating myself too much, do you have the capital to invest earlier on? But when is your market stream going to support that production? That becomes the time and point to invest in it. So just to give, these are New Zealand dollars, but the new build, which is 400 squares, high wind design, just the kit set delivered without the build cost is 60,000 New Zealand dollars. And so that works out, just get my calculator, 60,000 divided by 400 squares. 60, 1, 2, 3, 400. That works out $150 a square meter. And if I look at our other greenhouse, that's without building, that's just the kit set. Our other greenhouse was 23,000 for 90 square meters. That's $255 a square meter. So the smaller greenhouse, $250 a square meter. The bigger greenhouse, $150 a square meter.
Yeah, so huge difference there.
And this is, yeah, but so yeah, big is good in our case. And a little tip, we work really closely with Redpath, and I'm really big on if you talk with business owners instead of being on the website, you get a lot of golden nuggets off them. And so I looked at, can we, with it being a double arch greenhouse connected, can we build one greenhouse and then add on later? And the answer is yes. And with the different width greenhouses they have, they said that the cheapest way to do it, to make your greenhouse bigger down the track, is obviously not to extend the length of it where you've got to reskin it. It's just to build off the side, connect the arches to the current wall, remove the plastic and the roll-up side off that one wall, and basically go sort of 11.2 meter arch. In time to come, we could add another greenhouse on the side of it. And so it was good advice from them. We just chose to bite the bullet, make it happen. And with it being engineered, it's about a 6-month lead in for us to sign the contract, have it engineered, have it delivered, 3 payments spread out over that before we even begin the build process. And we're building on virgin ground. And with the design of it, having the gutter as part of the structure, we don't necessarily have to build on leveled, super flat ground. We're just going with our current contour, which is a slight slope to the sunset, and we're putting 200 mils, I think 8-inch of 4 on the roof line to be able to get that water off the greenhouse. and either use it in wash and pack or get it away from the growing area.
What about in terms of you've decided on it, a greenhouse that you're going to get, the type, the structure, how big it's going to be? Now it comes down to where to place it on the farm. There's a lot of different ways you can orient it if you have the option, if you're not space constrained. So for somebody who has the 100% full optionality in terms of where to put the greenhouse and what way to orient it, what would you advise them to think about?
JM's got a great, I guess, question you ask yourself when you're considering a greenhouse. First question is, are you going to be growing during winter? And for us, that's a yes. And so this was a big influence on us with all of our greenhouse builds. If you're growing during winter, it's really nice if you can orientate it east-west. So you've got the sun, when we do see it, on the long axis of the greenhouse all day. And so all our greenhouses are orientated east-west, including the new build. And then we've also sited our greenhouses. We're in an open wide valley. We've got a ridge at sunrise. So we just wait another hour in the morning for the sun to come over the ridge. Pretty much all our greenhouses are sited for winter sun, where the first sun arrives on the farm to break that longest night. Summer's fine. We've got great day length, sunshine hours, and sometimes heat units. But yes, really for having the sun on the greenhouses as early as possible in winter. So everything's orientated east-west and works the same with our garden layout. Everything's orientated so that we've basically got two main paths that head to wash and pack, and all our garden beds and all our greenhouses orientate to that. So the new greenhouse, there's 4 doors on it, but the main door comes straight onto the track. It's a concrete track, and then which comes up to undercover for wash and pack. So we're able to use wheels and trolleys. And in winter, with the amount of rain we have, there's only so much vehicle traffic you can have either on pasture or on wood chips before it just becomes somewhere where pigs would like to live. So we've got concrete access from the new greenhouse up to wash and pack, which is also the vehicle access for deliveries. And that's just where we are, super wet. The infrastructures, I don't know if I'm right here, but we're investing more in the infrastructures to lift our production and make our lives more comfortable, so it's enjoyable to work at, and even when it's nasty outside.
Do you have full utilities run out to the greenhouse, meaning power and water? Obviously water, but do you have power out there?
Yes, all our greenhouses have power to them, and we run ceiling fans 24/7 year round.
Do you have to heat any of yours?
No, I think people we get one frost a year, and I know a lot of growers from the colder climate. Wow, that sounds super easy, but the reason we're only getting one frost is you don't get frost when it's raining and windy. So we're an average temperature, nighttime temp in winter would be 7 to 9 degrees, and an average daytime temp would be 14 degrees, and that's 15 maybe. So there's not a lot of change in the temp. So to answer that, no, we've got no extra heating. I guess the rain, we're talking a lot about the rain, but what comes with the rain and the wind, especially when it's windy and wet, is the wind chill factor. So that's what we're removing with the greenhouse, and we only need the sun out for a little bit on the greenhouses, and they do warm up. So nothing's heated. The only heating we have is a heat pad in one of our propagation houses to get our early successions going. So no, we're just relying on sunshine.
You think
And
you'd get
I
a
think the soil
gain from?
testing definitely.
Would you get a gain from heating your greenhouse?
I definitely. I don't think we say no to that. What I would query those: how do we heat it, and what's the cost, and how much does that eat into our margins? From what I see with other growers, and it's in a much colder climate, if I was to heat a greenhouse, it would be our microgreens house, just to lift the days to maturity in there a little more. It's Our microgreens are 12 days to grow in winter, which is still pretty fast. No, I don't think we'd heat a greenhouse. I don't have experience with the real running costs, but I saw plenty to come back. We don't push our warm season crops going into the greenhouses super early, and that's because we've got a strong market stream for our fast crops, and we're limited with how much greenhouse space we have. So we are prioritizing getting another quick crop in before the tomatoes go in. So we transplant 1st of November, tomatoes and cukes, and we pull out 10th of April. And either side of that, we've got a fast crop in there either side. That things are really going to change with the big greenhouse. We're going to be able to push a bit earlier for season extension with summer crops. We're going to be able to diversify a bit more. But with the limited indoor space that we've had currently, we've had to prioritize the fastest crops we have.
What's your gut tell you if you don't have a lot of experience with heating a greenhouse, but do you think that would pay off? Say you could figure out a way to heat it, right? You think that trade-off is worth it?
Our fast crops in winter are 30% faster indoors. No, I think I might be completely wrong there, but I think my gut tells me the only crop that will pay the propane bill is fast crops like microgreen production in the dead of winter. Yeah, I might be digressing. I had I don't know, thought or revelation. Last winter, we only had an hour to plant. It was raining before, it's going to rain after. We lifted tarps outdoors and we direct seeded 4 varieties of baby Mizuna, 1 bed of each that all have a different days to maturity. And we direct seeded, the rains came, we retreated indoors. We direct seeded the same 4 varieties of Mizuna indoors, knowing they're 30% faster in winter. And that gave us 8 successions or 8 different harvest days from one planting. So we're really relying on the greenhouse. It's like insurance for us, but we have some harvest days where it's just not possible to harvest the direct seeded baby leaf outdoors. It's raining 48 hours and we've got to get across town. We've got to get the product in. And so it's really nice to be able to go in the greenhouse just in atrocious weather and harvest beautiful salad, get it to wash and pack and get it to our customers. I'd be interested in other growers' feedback. Is it worth heating for baby salad? We've got very average temperatures. I think if we did heat, we're not needing to lift it by March. We're not going to zero. We're not got frost. We're not got snow. It's just wet and windy. But I think potentially if we were heating, we're only needing to lift the temp in there by 5 degrees Celsius to really see a lift in our production. I think the other thing too with the rains is our soil temp outdoors. We pretty much sit at 9 degrees soil temp during winter, just to give a bit of perspective for other growers that maybe aren't farming in wet conditions. They might have big snow loads. So we're looking for 12 degrees outdoors before we're drilling our early spring crops, carrots, spring onions, whereas we can get 9 degrees indoors. We just haven't had the space historically to be able to grow carrots or spring onions under cover. We've needed to be pushing different types of salad, direct seeded, transplanted, sometimes some radishes, but really it's salad production undercover on the off season. So I'm pretty excited about the new greenhouse and looking at lifting our winter volumes and having the luxury of being able to diversify a bit more as well. Pretty much in winter, any other item we can stock in our fridges is a game changer for us. People just don't want to see a whole fridge of salad. They want to be able to buy a root vegetable or a few other items as well.
What about with tomatoes? You grow tomatoes in the greenhouse?
Yep, our 90 square greenhouse is full of tomatoes now. There's
Would that one benefit from heating? With as wet as it is?
I've heard Curtis say it a bit before, and I know, yeah, I don't have experience with heating, so I'm just winging it here, but I'm cautious about the heating bill and the return on investment. And until I go there, I don't really have my perspective of what it's like for us on our farm. But I saw Curtis go super early, heated greenhouse, and he was kind of calling out the heating cost. And I know it's a lot colder in Kelowna. He called out the heating cost of going super early. That actually, when you look at the running cost, it really ate into your margin. And I think I'm totally open to the consideration, but the thing, we can be heating to get our tomatoes earlier, but the thing we don't have is sunshine. Like November was 28 out of 30 days we didn't see the sun. So it's hard we'd have to be heating more, but we still don't have photosynthesis. So we just choose to go a bit later, and we basically, on an average year here, it rains until the longest day before we start to see a bit more consistent weather.
Like with crops that can be susceptible to cooler temperature and moisture, like tomatoes, are you seeing issues now in that greenhouse since it's unheated? Do you notice growing issues given the climate?
No, I get that. So yeah, the one thing about the high wind design greenhouse, that's our sidewalls are, and it depends on your design, but they're between 2.5 to 3 meters high, and that's before the arches even go over the top. So it's a pretty substantial build. And when I put our first greenhouse up, I was like, yikes, that thing is, so tall. It's worked out really nice that having especially if we don't have a ceiling vent, the bigger greenhouses do, the excess heat sits right up in the top of the greenhouse, and the crops, the tomatoes and cukes, are below that. So no, we're pretty good for issues with the tomatoes and cukes, and we're really big on the drop-down system. And so we're actually only planting one succession of those crops per year. We don't have a long drawn-out season because we don't have the heat units. But by being able to train them, bring them down to the comfortable part of the greenhouse. And I guess for us, the difference between our high tunnels and the cat tunnels is the height that we have to be able to train those crops during summer. And yeah, it seems a little crazy in winter when you're growing low crops down and you look up and it's 5 meters to the ridge line. But yeah, it's nice having that excess heat above the growing area. And generally no, but we're really pushing in the greenhouse with more fertility at least twice a year, and really managing it with our ventilation, like opening and closing the roll-up sides. For example, if we have a wind coming from the south, we'll only open up the roll-up side on the north, and vice versa. If it's really cold and wet for a day, we'll just open the greenhouse briefly around midday to let some ventilation in and then close it back up. And then in summer, when it's hot and humid, we can open the whole thing up. So that's roll up side doors. We've got drip irrigation. We can turn on the drip during the day, and our ceiling fans running 24/7. I think the cheapest change to our big greenhouse was after 12 months, we put a ceiling fan up. It's great for summer airflow, but really for winter, we've got to be really careful we don't irrigate too much too late, especially if it's overhead, which we're completely dripping the greenhouses now. If we over irrigated too much too late and then closed up, opening up the greenhouse the next morning, there would just be this vapor floating in the greenhouse. Once we put the fan, that was a game changer for that. Our irrigation is not automated, it's manual. And yeah, greenhouses are high maintenance, but it's nice to be able to work in there when it's not really even possible to do too much outdoors.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Profitable Mini Farm. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, can you do me a favor? Share this episode with a friend. I hope you enjoyed this episode, but more importantly, I hope you can use the information in this episode to make a positive and profitable change on your farm. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.